For years, employees at Williams Innovations whispered about the unseen forces controlling their fate. Promotions vanished, complaints were ignored, and those in power ruled unchecked. But when a lowly cleaner stepped onto the executive floor, no one suspected she held the key to their downfall. Because she wasn't just a cleaner, she was the CEO's daughter, and she had come for justice. Jasmine Williams sat across from her father, Robert Williams, the legendary CEO of Williams Innovations. His weathered hands clasped together as he voiced a concern that had been weighing on him for months. You understand this company from an executive level, but you've never seen what happens beneath the surface. His deep voice carried both pride and apprehension. If you're going to lead one day, you need to see it for yourself. The challenge was set. She would go undercover, stripping away her privilege to experience the company's true culture. Jasmine embraced the idea, knowing it would be an opportunity to prove herself. That evening, she tucked away her tailored suits and designer accessories. Her sleek, straightened hair was left in its natural curls, and expensive glasses were swapped for simple frames. She became Janet, a new cleaning recruit. Her father arranged her placement through a third-party cleaning service, ensuring her anonymity. HR processed her as an entry-level janitor, unaware of the woman behind the fabricated identity. As she stepped into the building on her first night, a sense of unease settled over her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't walking into a boardroom. She was walking into the shadows of the company her father built. The orientation was impersonal. A gruff supervisor handed her a list of responsibilities without so much as a glance. Keep your head down. Finish your shift. If you mess up, don't expect a second chance. His tone was cold, dismissive. She nodded, gripping the mop handle with unfamiliar hands. As she moved through the hallways, employees brushed past her as if she were invisible. Conversations continued as though she wasn't even there, discussing confidential information with complete disregard for the person emptying their trash. Executives who once greeted her in meetings didn't spare her a glance. Then came her first encounter with Gerald Hayes, the operations manager. His shoes clicked sharply against the marble as he halted beside her. That streak on the window isn't acceptable, he snapped. Jasmine turned, confused. The glass was pristine. Still, she forced herself to nod and redo the section. The shift dragged on, exhaustion settling in as her body protested the physical labor she'd never done before. By the time her shift ended, her hands were red and raw, her back aching from bending over floors and scrubbing surfaces. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of reality settled over her. This wasn't about improving workplace efficiency or streamlining procedures. This was about something deeper: power, control, and a toxic hierarchy that thrived on the suffering of those at the bottom. Her father had been right. Reports and policies didn't reveal the truth. To understand Williams Innovations, she had to live it. And as she rubbed her sore palms, she vowed that when this was over, she would change it. Jasmine had barely begun her shift when she heard the first outburst. "You call this clean?" Gerald Hayes' voice thundered through the executive hallway. The workers around her flinched, lowering their heads as the operations manager loomed over one of the older janitors. Darnell, a man who had likely worked here for years, stood frozen, gripping his mop tightly. I just finished it, sir," Darnell stammered. Gerald sneered, stepping onto the freshly mopped section of the floor, twisting his shoe deliberately to leave a scuff mark. "Well, it doesn't look finished to me. Do it again." Jasmine watched in silence as Darnell nodded, shoulders slumping, before dutifully starting over. The humiliation in his eyes made her stomach turn. This was what her father had meant, a culture that thrived on fear. She turned back to her task, wiping down the pristine glass walls that framed the executive offices. Every movement was precise, every surface polished until it shone. She couldn't afford mistakes, not on her first night, but it didn't matter. The sharp click of leather shoes stopped beside her. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. "Gerald, that window isn't clean." His voice was smooth, laced with cruelty. Jasmine blinked at the spotless glass. "Sir, I just finished," he scoffed. "Are you arguing with me?" "No, sir." She swallowed her pride, grabbed the rag, and wiped the window again. Gerald crossed his arms. "Do it properly this time." She cleaned it once more, this time slower, ensuring every inch gleamed. Still, Gerald wasn't satisfied. He ran a finger along the surface, held it up as if expecting dust, and smirked. "Pathetic. You're lucky I'm in a good mood today, or I'd write you up for this." Jasmine kept her head down, gripping the rag so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had faced boardroom interrogations, negotiated million-dollar deals, but this, being degraded like she was nothing, was a different kind of battle. "Get me some coffee," Gerald ordered suddenly, waving his hand dismissively. "I want it black. Now." Jasmine hesitated. She wasn't a personal assistant, she was a cleaner, but she couldn't break her cover. She turned toward the break room, forcing herself to comply. But Gerald chuckled. "I'm joking," he said, grinning. "God, you're slow. No wonder you're stuck cleaning floors." Heat burned in her chest. She knew he was baiting her, waiting for a reaction. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she nodded. "Yes, sir." Gerald frowned, dissatisfied with her lack of response. He took a step closer, eyes narrowing. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Jasmine remained silent. The next moment, she felt it. Cold. A full cup of water dumped over her head. The shock stole her breath away. The liquid seeped through her uniform, running down her skin in icy rivulets. Gasps rippled through the hallway. The other workers froze, watching in horror. Gerald grinned. "Now you have something real to clean up." For a split second she considered it, dropping her act, revealing who she was, ending his career right there. But no, not yet. With slow, deliberate movements, she grabbed her mop. She wouldn't react. She wouldn't break. As she knelt down to clean the very water he had spilled, she heard Darnell whisper beside her. "Stay out of his way," he warned. "He enjoys breaking people." Jasmine squeezed the mop handle, jaw tightening. He thought he had broken her. He had no idea what was coming. Jasmine had encountered many types of people in the corporate world. Calculating executives, ruthless negotiators, power-hungry CEOs. But Derek Phillips was something else entirely. He didn't yell like Gerald. He didn't need to. His cruelty was methodical, precise, and patient. On her second week as Janet the cleaner, she was assigned to the executive wing. That meant cleaning Derek's office, a task that should have taken 20 minutes. Instead, it stretched into an excruciating 3-hour ordeal. She entered quietly, expecting the usual routine. Empty trash, wipe down surfaces, vacuum the floor. Derek was at his desk, scrolling through his laptop. He barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like furniture rather than a person. "Oh good," he muttered, not looking up. "This office is a disaster. I need it spotless." Jasmine's trained eyes scanned the room. There was no disaster. His office was one of the tidiest she had seen. Only a few coffee cups on the side table, some papers stacked neatly on his desk. But she nodded, keeping her expression neutral. She got to work, moving efficiently, wiping down his desk, dusting the bookshelves, sanitizing the glass coffee table. Everything was immaculate. Then came his voice. "That's not how you clean glass properly." Jasmine paused, glancing at the table. It was spotless. Derek sighed dramatically, rising from his chair. "You're leaving streaks everywhere." He crouched down beside her, pointing to an invisible flaw. "You need to use circular motions, not straight lines." Jasmine's grip tightened on the cloth. He was manufacturing mistakes. She bit her tongue and cleaned again, this time using slow, circular motions. When she finished, Derek performed an exaggerated inspection, running his finger along surfaces, holding them up to the light, shaking his head like a disappointed teacher. "This won't do," he declared. "Start over." Jasmine exhaled quietly, then repeated the entire process. Again, and again, and again. Each time he found a new issue. The carpet had lint, invisible to anyone but him. The windows had smudges. They didn't. The desk wasn't properly organized. It was untouched. And then, as she was finishing the fourth cleaning, he did something she had been expecting. She saw it in the corner of her eye, his fingers tipping a coffee cup just enough for the dark liquid to spill onto the freshly polished table. "Oh no," Derek said, feigning surprise. "Would you look at that?" He turned to her with a smirk. "You really should be more careful." Jasmine's pulse slowed. He enjoyed this. The act of making her clean up a mess he had created. The power play. But what Derek didn't know was that Jasmine had been prepared. Inside her cleaning cart, tucked between the supplies, was a small recording device. It had been capturing every single word since she had entered his office. She cleaned the spill without a word, pressing her lips together as she wiped up his latest game. Derek leaned back against his desk, watching her like a predator studying prey. "You're not very good at this job, are you?" he mused. Jasmine met his eyes for the first time that night. She smiled, not a forced, submissive smile, but a knowing one, because she had just collected everything she needed to destroy him. Jasmine sat stiffly in the chair across from Karen Mitchell. the HR director of Williams Innovations. Karen had the perfect corporate persona: warm smile, soft voice, and a poster behind her desk that read, "Your voice matters." But Jasmine knew better. This wasn't a safe space. This was just another part of the system built to protect power, not people. "Tell me what happened," Karen said, folding her hands together, feigning concern. Jasmine took a slow breath and began. "It happened 3 nights ago. I was cleaning the executive hallway when Gerald Hayes poured water on me. He humiliated me in front of other employees. It was deliberate." Karen frowned, nodding sympathetically. "That must have been difficult for you." Difficult? That wasn't the word. But Jasmine held her tongue. "Yes. And I've noticed a pattern. Gerald regularly mistreats cleaning staff. He targets people. If someone speaks up, he retaliates." Karen sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I appreciate you bringing this to me, Janet. Really, I do." Jasmine knew what was coming. "But," Karen continued, giving a carefully rehearsed smile, "I think there might be some misunderstanding here." Jasmine stiffened. "Misunderstanding?" Karen tilted her head. "Gerald has high expectations. He's responsible for maintaining standards across the executive floor. And let's be honest, cleaning isn't exactly a complex job. If he's tough on you, it's probably because he wants things done properly." Jasmine gripped the arms of her chair. "He poured water on me. He didn't care about cleanliness. He wanted to humiliate me." Still, she kept her expression neutral. "So, what you're saying is, there won't be any action taken?" Karen let out a practiced sigh, as if disappointed. "These things are tricky, Janet. We take all reports seriously, but without concrete evidence, it's just your word against his." Jasmine resisted the urge to smile. Concrete evidence? She had video recordings, audio, more than enough proof, but she wasn't about to reveal her hand. Not yet. Karen leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Let me give you some advice. Stay in your lane. People in your position don't always understand the pressures management faces. It's best to just focus on your work and not take things personally." There it was. The mask had dropped. Karen wasn't here to help. She was here to protect Gerald, protect the system. Jasmine stood, nodding stiffly. "Thank you for your time." As she turned to leave, she clicked the stop button on the small recorder tucked inside her pocket. HR was never meant to protect employees like her. Now she had proof of that too. The executive boardroom was nearly empty, the last remnants of a high-profile meeting still scattered across the polished walnut table. Half-empty coffee cups, stacks of documents, and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. Jasmine entered quietly, her cleaning cart rolling beside her. This was just another routine task. Or so she thought. She had barely begun when she heard the sharp click of high heels echoing through the room. Veronica Wells, Senior Vice President of Sales. Ruthless. Feared. A woman whose presence could silence an entire floor. Jasmine turned just as Veronica strode toward the conference table, flipping through a folder, oblivious to the cleaner standing in the room. Jasmine hesitated. The meeting had ended. This room was scheduled for cleaning. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, keeping her tone respectful. "I can come back later if you need more time." Veronica froze. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, piercing blue eyes locking onto Jasmine like a predator spotting its prey. "What did you just say to me?" she asked, voice dangerously quiet. Jasmine remained still. "I was only asking if—" The slap came without warning, a sharp, open-handed crack across Jasmine's cheek. Pain exploded across her face as her head snapped to the side. The force sent her stumbling against the cleaning cart, a rag slipping from her grip and landing on the pristine floor. The room went silent. Jasmine barely breathed. The entire sales team, still gathered near the other end of the room, sat frozen, staring at their laptops, their notes, the walls, anywhere but at what had just happened. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of the moment pressed against Jasmine's chest, tighter than any humiliation she had endured before. Veronica's perfectly manicured fingers curled into a fist before relaxing again. She exhaled sharply, adjusting her blazer. "Don't you ever interrupt me again," she hissed, voice as cold as steel. "You are nothing here. Nothing. Now clean this up and get out." Jasmine's body remained still, but inside, she was on fire. She had tolerated Gerald's cruelty, endured Derek's games, listened to Karen's corruption. But this was different. This wasn't just disrespect. It was violence. Her fingers twitched at her side. It would be so easy to say it, to rip off the disguise and watch the color drain from Veronica's face. She could end it all right here. But then she saw them. The others. The junior executives, analysts, assistants, all too afraid to intervene. They had witnessed it. They had seen their boss strike an employee and said nothing. This wasn't just about Veronica. It was about all of them. Jasmine inhaled deeply. Then, without a word, she bent down, picked up the rag, and resumed cleaning. Veronica smirked, already moving on, already forgetting the girl she had just hit. Because to her, it didn't matter. But it would. Soon, it would matter more than anything. The executive boardroom gleamed under the morning sunlight, its polished walnut table reflecting the faces of those who had gathered for the emergency meeting. Jasmine stood at the far end of the room, her cleaning cart parked discreetly near the corner. She remained in her janitor's uniform, blending into the background, as the very people who had mistreated her took their seats. Gerald sat with his usual arrogance, flipping through his notes without a care. Derek adjusted his tie, distractedly checking his phone. Veronica leaned back, arms crossed, her expression bored. Karen, the HR director, had a polite, expectant smile. At precisely 10 a.m., Robert Williams entered the room. The energy shifted. This was it. Robert, Jasmine's father, and the CEO of Williams Innovations, surveyed the room with a calm but serious expression. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he said, taking his place at the head of the table. "I've recently received some disturbing reports regarding workplace culture, and I believe it's time we address them." A few nervous glances were exchanged. They had no idea what was coming. Gerald exhaled impatiently. "Sir, if this is about employee complaints, I think HR can handle it. Frankly, we have better things to—" "Actually?" Jasmine interrupted, stepping forward. Every head turned. Gerald's brow furrowed. "What the hell are you doing here?" Derek scoffed. "Who let the janitor speak?" Jasmine ignored them. She reached up and removed her headscarf, letting her natural curls fall freely. Then, she took off the plain glasses and set them on the table. Veronica's smirk faded. Karen's polite expression stiffened. Then came the final moment. Jasmine unzipped the top of her uniform, revealing the elegant blouse and tailored blazer underneath. Recognition crashed into them like a tidal wave. Gasps filled the room. Faces turned pale. Jasmine let the silence stretch, watching the horror dawn on their expressions. "My name is Jasmine Williams," she said, voice steady, confident. "And for the past 2 weeks, I have been working undercover as a cleaner in this company." Veronica stiffened. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Jasmine raised a small remote and clicked a button. The projector screen behind her lit up with security footage. The first clip played, Gerald dumping water over her head, sneering as he humiliated her. Next, Derek, forcing her to scrub an already clean surface over and over, smirking at her frustration. Then, Veronica, standing over her, hand raised, the sharp crack of the slap echoing through the room. The air turned thick with suffocating silence. Karen's eyes darted toward the exit. Gerald's jaw tightened. Derek swallowed hard. They were trapped. Robert folded his arms. "Do any of you have anything to say?" Veronica's mask cracked first. "This is out of context. I was under stress." Jasmine clicked again. Audio played. "You are nothing here. Nothing." Veronica shut her mouth. Derek shifted. This is a setup." Jasmine arched a brow. "Did I force you to spill coffee on your own desk? Or make you harass employees?" Gerald gritted his teeth. "You little—" The boardroom doors swung open. 2 security guards entered. Robert's voice was firm, unwavering. "Effective immediately. Gerald Hayes, Derek Phillips, Veronica Wells, and Karen Mitchell are terminated." The guards stepped forward. Panic spread across their faces. "But—" Veronica started. "Get up," one of the guards ordered. Gerald clenched his fists. Derek turned pale. Karen, silent all this time, finally realized she had backed the wrong side. Jasmine watched as they were escorted out, one by one. Justice had arrived. The air in the boardroom remained heavy long after the last of them were escorted out. Gerald, Derek, Veronica, and Karen had walked into this meeting with absolute power, and walked out with nothing. Jasmine exhaled slowly, setting the remote down on the conference table. Around her, the remaining executives sat in stunned silence, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others looked away, avoiding eye contact. Robert Williams, her father, stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Now that we've addressed those who failed this company, it's time to talk about who will lead it moving forward. The board members straightened. A few glanced at each other as if already piecing together what was next. Robert turned to Jasmine. You've proven something that can't be taught in any business school or executive boardroom, he said, his voice carrying through the room with quiet authority. You didn't just expose corruption. You lived through it. You understood the very foundation of this company in a way no one else ever could. And that's why, effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. And my daughter, Jasmine Williams, will be taking my place. For the first time, the stunned silence wasn't out of fear. It was out of awe. Jasmine lifted her chin, owning the moment. She had worked for this, endured humiliation, pain, and injustice to stand here today. She let her gaze sweep across the room, pausing at every executive who had ignored what was happening under their noses. The toxic culture we allowed to fester here is over, she began, her voice steady but firm. For too long, certain individuals abused their power, believing they were untouchable. That ends today. She placed both hands on the table, leaning in slightly. We will be implementing strict policies to protect our workers, not just in words, but in actions. Any report of mistreatment will be investigated. Anyone caught abusing their position will be removed immediately. A few executives exchanged wary glances. This isn't just about punishing a few bad apples, Jasmine continued. It's about dismantling the system that allowed them to thrive. She straightened, letting the weight of her words settle in. For those who believe in that vision, you'll find a place in this company. She paused, her gaze hardening. For those who don't, you know where the door is. No one spoke. No one dared challenge her. Her father watched her with something rare in his eyes. Pride. Then Jasmine gave them one last reminder. Leadership isn't about power. It's about justice. She turned toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, letting the golden morning light spill over her. And today, she glanced back, her voice unwavering. Justice has arrived.